the summary. So I wanted to get on tonight just to do the summary. It's kind of a lazy day today with the dark clouds. So I have my sweat jacket on and just kind of keeping warm, maybe with some glasses and a good book, right? And I'm not much of a reader, but lately I've been reading a lot because there's a lot of stuff you can learn when you read. Anyway, let's do this. How about that? So chapter 6 summary in the book Principles 15th edition is on page 183. So this is the stuff you want to know. If you don't watch the whole chapter 6, this is the part you want. So a less than freehold estate, less than freehold is a chattel estate, which is personal property. So remember that chattel real is personal property. So on the state exam in California, what they say is, what's a chattel real? A chattel real is all your personal property, not your real property. So let's say that your client's moving out and they have all their stuff on the front lawn ready to go into the moving truck. That's their chattel reel, all right? So chattel reel is your personal property with no ownership rights, such as a leasehold estate or a lease. A leasehold is an exclusive right to occupy. So if you're highlighting the chapter summary, you're going to highlight less than freehold is chattel estate, highlight and circle personal property, and no ownership rights you would highlight. And then highlight and circle leasehold is highlight exclusive right to occupy. So leasehold is right to occupy and use the property on a temporary basis. The type of leasehold estates include an estate for years. So an estate for years doesn't have to be years. It's just a predetermined amount of time. So like an Airbnb would be, okay, I'm going to have the Airbnb on Monday and I'm going to be done on Thursday. So that's an estate for years. And then you have an estate from period to period, an estate at will, an estate at sufferance. So there's 4 of them, okay? And the owner is the lessor and the renter is the lessee. Remember, lessor, O-R, is for owner. The minimum requirement of a lease or rental agreement can be remembered by the acronym LAND. L for length of time, and A for the amount of rent, N for the names of the parties, and D for the description of the property. And I haven't seen that on the state exam, but it's a good thing to remember. LAND, length, amount, names, and description. Contract rent. So contract rent is actual rent, whereas economic rent is the amount the property might get if it were leased for a current market value. And then highlight rent control. If you get the book, highlight, hi, how you doing? Can we get a thumbs up? I just have to start asking for those so that my YouTube page gets a little more information out there for everybody. So rent control in California is pretty popular. And rent control is a governmental regulation of the amount of rent the landlord can charge to the tenants. Landlords often use credit scores to qualify the tenants. So as per the state exam, yeah, you'll probably use credit scores to qualify your clients, but there's different ways to do background checks. And there's a new law out that's not on your state exam, but you need to know it if you're going to be in real estate. There's a new law out that says when you're screening somebody, you have to give them your parameters. Like you have to say, okay, we're only taking people that have a 680 credit score. Your income has to be 3 times the amount of rent. Vice versa, you're going to say all your qualifications, and then if the person wants to try to qualify, then they have to pay for their rent screening. Now, if they don't match one of those things that was your qualification, then they don't get their screening fee back. But if they matched it, then they get their screening fee back. So there's a lot of new laws out that were released last year in 2024 that you really have to know if you're going to be a landlord, and especially in California, okay? Unless you're going to hire a property manager that's going to help you. So rent controls in different areas of California you have to be aware of it. A tenant may be required to pay a security deposit. On the state exam, the security deposit is 2 months for an unfurnished apartment or property and 3 months for a furnished apartment. On the state exam, they'll also ask you what determines the amount of the security deposit, and the answer would be furnished or not. However, last year in 2024, the new rule came that said you cannot collect more than 1 month rent. So there are loopholes for people that are, so we have mom and pop landlords and we have people that own apartment buildings. And so there's different rules depending on what category you're in as a landlord, okay? So be aware of that. You don't have to be aware of that for the state exam. You just have to be aware of that in the real world. So there's the real world and there's the state exam world, okay? So that's an important thing about the security deposit. A statement of property condition ensures that both parties are aware of the condition of the premises before the tenant moves in. So what you use is it's really great. It's a sheet and it says all the different rooms and areas in the house. And the move-in sheet, you make sure you write all the things that are how the property is, and you take pictures, and then you'll have the same side will say move out, and then have the different date, okay? So the statement of the property condition ensures both parties are aware of the conditions of the premises before the tenant moves in. A lease for more than 1 year must be in writing and signed by the lessor, the owner. So a lot of people think that, oh, my landlord signed it, but I didn't sign it, so I don't have to stick to the lease. Well, that's not true, because the only one that really has to sign the lease is the landlord. Got it? So without a clause disallowing it, a tenant may assign or transfer the entire lease or sublease it out or assign it to somebody else. So let's say that you lease a property for 5 years, and at 2 years you get a job transfer. So you get the job transfer and you're like, okay, I got 2 more years. What am I going to do? And let's say the landlord doesn't want to take the property back, and they say, you have a 5-year lease, you got to deal with it. So maybe you find somebody that wants to rent it from you for more than your lease is for, and you can actually do that. That's a sublease. So you can sublease or assign it to somebody else, and that's not changing ownership, it's only changing possession, okay? A lease or rental agreement can be terminated. Number 1, expiration of the lease. Number 2, lack of quiet possession. So the landlord owes the tenant quiet enjoyment. Quiet enjoyment means I give you the key, you pay me rent, I need to leave you alone. A lot of people don't do that. Repairs for habitability, eviction or operation of law, and then destruction of the premises, breach of contract, surrender or abandonment. A landlord has legal minimum obligations to maintain habitability, and the tenant has a legal obligation to care for the premises. Selling an apartment building does not terminate the lease for the tenants, okay? In the case of an eviction, it is unlawful for a landlord to lock out a tenant, take their property, remove doors, shut off utilities, or trespass. First, the landlord must give a 3-day pay rent or quit. And after they do that, they have to do an unlawful detainer. Remember that the unlawful detainer is the document used to evict somebody. And when they ask you that as a question on the state exam, it's the unlawful detainer, not the 3-day pay rent or quit. Okay. Now, the unlawful detainer is what gets you the court date. You file that with the court. And once you go to court, you're going to get a writ of possession so that you'll be able to get your property back, fix it, and rent it out. Okay. So that's the stuff I highlighted. Also on a sales leaseback, lease with a purchase option, ground leases, graduated leases. We went over all of these. Gross leases, net leases, and percentage leases are all specialty leases. And the last sentence on this page is, the property manager is a licensed real estate professional paid to oversee the property management and operations of rental and commercial property. A residential manager is a tenant of the property and is an on-site manager. Thank you for the thumbs up. And is an on-site manager, and they do not have to be licensed. The Institute of Real Estate Management, that's actually a group, they're there, and they offer a designation of a certified property manager. There's also accredited management organization, and they have an accredited residential manager. Those are not on your state exam. Those are if you want to get into property management. So on page 184, there's like mix and match, like where you're looking at the terminology and then the definition. So if you get this book, you could practice through that. But I'm going to do the questions and answers on page 185. And then when we get going, probably tomorrow's Friday. If we do it Friday, we're going to start chapter 7, which is escrow and title insurance. So question is, an estate at will can be ended by who? Hi, how you doing? Thanks for joining. It can be ended by either the lessor or the lessee. So an estate at will can be ended by either party. If a real estate broker sells a property where the buyer will take possession prior to transferring title, the document he would use to have the buyer and seller execute is called an interim occupancy agreement. Got that? A license, this is important because it was on my state exam. A license is non-transferable and can be revoked. So they're talking about like liquor licenses and business licenses. The maximum deposit that can be collected and held for an unfurnished apartment for the state exam is 2 months. And remember, if it's furnished, it's 3 months. And remember, in the real world, it's 1 month. Okay. A tenant signs a written lease for 2 years on a home. The lease made no mention of assignments or subleasing. The tenant can do what? Well, if there's no mention, if it doesn't say you can't do it, then you can do it. So assign or sublease the home since the lease did not address that item. Able to hold, it says able holds a 2-year lease with an option to purchase. So he's got a 2-year with an option to buy and assigns the lease to Baker. Which of the following is correct? Well, if he assigns it to Baker, now Baker has an option to purchase. Got it? And then we have a couple more and we'll be done. Which of the following is a benefit of a net lease? And the net lease is the lessor receives net income. Going on to a single line or retail store located along a major transportation corridor in a commercially zoned area would be known as, and the answer is a strip commercial development, or better known as a strip mall. And the last question is, which of the following is often used when commercial leases contain an accelerator clause there to adjust the rental amount periodically, usually annually for inflation? And that's the consumer price index. So we finally made it. I don't know how long it took me to get through chapter 6, but chapter 6 was a long one. And the plan is to start chapter 7 next. And chapter 7 is escrow and title insurance. And escrow and title insurance, this is a really good chapter because not only is it real for the state exam, but it's also stuff that you need to know in the real world. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the questions and comments and reach out to me. Let me know what state you're studying for because we've had people pass other states by taking our classes. And we do the exam prep. And we're not doing it this weekend because it's Easter weekend, but we are starting on Monday night at 6 o'clock and going till 9:30. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. And thank you for following. Bye.